Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Panache cast. Pete and I are joined this week by a terrific guest, Katharina Bisset, who founded Nerds of Law. We met Katharina in Austria when Pete and I attended a conference in Vienna as the guests of the Department for International Trade, which you've all heard us talk about previously. Like us, Nerds of Law are podcasters, bloggers, and legal tech enthusiasts. They've got a fascinating website, which is full of tips on how to improve your career. So without further ado, welcome, Katharina.
Thanks for inviting me. It's great to have you. And it's great to see you again, despite all the circumstances.
Yeah, well, it's been a tough time for us all, hasn't it? Life's changed quite a lot, and it's great to see you again too. Thanks for coming on.
It almost makes it easier for this kind of thing, though, to actually be able to just log on and see everyone remotely. It's
yes, I've had a much easier time recording podcasts with people because everyone's at home with a mic, and it wouldn't be that easy if people were sat in their offices, really.
Yeah. Right. Well, we wouldn't be able to do this if we had to come over to Austria every time. So this is good for us to get to do it. But let's talk about you a bit if we can. Obviously, you've created Nerds of Law, but tell us a bit about what you did before then, your background before you started that.
Well, it's a long story. I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. I mean, I'm a lawyer by trade, if that's a trade, but I've always wanted to study law, but at the same time was very technically inclined. So already as a teenager, I worked as a, IT guy, person who tells other people to turn on and off their computers again for money. So when I started law school, I started doing specializations in e-commerce law, data privacy law, media law, everywhere around that. So it was quite normal for me to get into the business of technology and law because I knew how it worked. It was a bit easier for me to figure out what the legal implications were. Like, for example, if you think about liability of a provider, if you know what the difference between a host and a caching and a search engine is, then you understand why liability is different. And we're talking here almost 20 years ago, I'm afraid to admit. So that wasn't that common. So e-commerce directive, that was all new, that was all fresh and hype. So a lot of people did it, but didn't have the technical background. So that allowed me, I worked at the university in the IT law department already whilst I'm studying. And then I moved into consumer protection, all the tech focus when online shopping started and all that. And after law school, I went to work for big IT companies. So I spent the first couple of years of my career dealing with very, very big IT contracts, from outsourcing, software development, everything. But in the end of the day, the attorney bit was always itching me, and the self-employmentness and freedom behind it. Yeah. So I went back to become an associate, and the way it works in Austria, you have to do quite a lot of years of training. So I'm on my last month now. So I'll be an attorney right after the summer. So that's good. And at the same time, I never gave up on my technical hobbies. So when I met Michael Lanzinger, who is, well, coincidentally now also my boss because I have to get my times in, but also the co-founder of Nerds of Law. It was really nice to see someone who's very like-minded, deeply nerdy, but also a lawyer who's made it work, that balance really. So he's more the criminal cybercrime part, and I'm more the more civilized person. I know civil person of us. But that really showed me you can do both. And when we were working in different law firms and started teaching legal tech to other attorneys, we said, well, we need a brand because we didn't want to brand it either way. That's how Nerds of Law came to be, just as a brand, really. And then we had ideas for our own software products and publications, etc. So now we're in the process of setting it up as a business. Where apart from our law firms, we'll develop our own legal tech software. Will help legal tech startups or businesses to, either with the legal side or everything in between, and go really into consulting into law firms as well. So we also want to help our colleagues be a bit more tech savvy. And that's really where we're going. So we've got a couple of products on the run at the moment. I'm working with, in the course of a legal tech hackathon between the University of Vienna and the Tech Uni, we developed a tool to help save proof when it comes to hate speech on the internet. Okay. And that's been extremely well received. So we'll spend the summer working on that as well. So there are a lot of projects coming up, but yeah, it'll be all in a business. That's what's coming up. A lot of new projects and exciting things to do.
So you want to cover all of the bases in legal tech. You not only want to consult on it, you want to develop your own software, you want to talk about it to people like this and cover everything.
Yeah, I'm really bad like that. We're really bad like that. It's just, I think we're interested in so many different things that we couldn't just stick with that one thing. And if we had been either one of us in a, say, big law firm, and we'd have to adhere to some corporate identity or more strict structures, then we wouldn't have the freedom to do that. So basically, Nerds of Law for us is really our hobby made into a business.
Yeah. Well, I guess there's similarities there with us, aren't there, Pete? You know, you're the technical background, I'm the legal background. I certainly couldn't even get close to doing what you're doing, and I expect, Katharina, you know way more about technological bits than I do. But it's a melding of minds, and we like to do lots of different things ourselves, and maybe we're all guilty of taking on too much.
Yeah, but that's how it works, really. And I've seen that in the hackathon, where usually lawyers and techie people are like, oh no, we don't talk to each other, we don't understand each other. I've really had the complete opposite experience, maybe because I've spent so much time talking mainly with engineers, software developers, etc., that when I went into law firm again, it was for me much harder to talk to other lawyers, really, because they didn't know what I was talking about most of the time. And now in the hackathon, I saw it again, how great it can work and how great it can be. So that's, I totally understand the combination, and it's super.
Well, we certainly found, haven't we? I mean, I might have a fixed mindset when it comes to doing work. I might not necessarily know about the latest advances. And so I don't necessarily think the same way that Pete does from the technical side. And very often he's been able to come up with much better ways of doing things than I would have come up with on my own, because I don't know what's available without the other half of the brain trust between us, you know, the technical side. So it works better. The 1 + 1 in our case is equal 3, hopefully.
Oh, yeah. That's the best way to do maths, isn't it?
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, what do you find in the areas that you deal with, in the legal firms you deal with and stuff? How do you find their technical knowledge? Do you think that is something that is increasing nowadays, as I guess younger people with more experience on, you know, using mobile, using everything else, using video calling, and that come into firms? Is there an increase in that technical knowledge coming through, or do you think it's still an area that's lagging a bit?
I think there's an increase when it comes to the user side. So there's much more tech savviness when it comes to social media, etc. But the really in-depth knowledge has been the same, because either you've got it or you don't. I think with the technical knowledge is to have a certain logical approach to it that you can barely teach anyone. So either you're really interested in it and you learn it, or you just understand how things interact and how things work. That helps, and there it doesn't matter what generation you're in. I mean, I switched my dad to a Mac after he turned 60 because I told him I wasn't going to support his Windows machines anymore. And it wasn't a problem, but I could not do that with, I know younger people, I could never do that. So I think it's a very personal thing, but from a user side, it gets easy. You get so much more comfortable with searching for things, but like a search logic is something extremely important as a lawyer. But I think the demand from the clients is getting more as well, because if you have a client on the other side that is the CIO of a company and he wants you to write a software license, and you understand what he's doing and you understand what his problems are, then the chances of him coming back to you are much higher than if you've never seen source code from the inside.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you touched on this earlier, the whole use of technology now for us to be able to talk to each other and whatnot. COVID is obviously very, it's a current thing. We're all dealing with it. Have you seen, as a result of what's going on now, an acceleration in what's being used in Austria, whether it's specifically legal tech, or we all know about the video conferencing and Teams and Zoom? What's the change like? What's the landscape like where you are?
I think when it comes to law firms, it was much harder than for legal departments, because a lot of legal departments already have a certain flexibility, or at least have the technical setup to be able to work mobile. But when the restrictions came in mid-March here, there's only one big tech store in the city center of Vienna where also all the law firms are based. And they said within half a day, they were completely sold out of laptops. But that's exactly the point. So a lot weren't really there technically, and even fewer were there mentally.
Yeah.
So what it has forced people to deal with, and I'm talking more about law firms than about legal departments, is to deal with the fact that people can work remotely and the world does not end. Yeah. And they don't slack off all day because they can't go anywhere anyway, apart from that. But so yes, obviously everyone was forced to work mobile, and there were a lot of law firms who started off as saying, yeah, no, we're in a service industry, we're not going to work remotely, we have to be there. But then the courts closed, so why would anyone be there? And the clients were at home, so they didn't want you to come in anyway.
Yeah.
So they were forced to do that. But now that the restrictions are lifted, you see a really big gap. So they're the ones who say, okay, I can see it working, and now we've got the technical setup. So, you know, the world didn't end. My associates and other slaves did not run away and sit in the pool all day. So it might help. But then there's the other extreme who said the day the restrictions were lifted, or it was legal to have your people come in again, everyone had to sit there and be within shouting distance. But I think the first group is the one who will have the advantage in the future.
Yeah. I'm inclined to agree.
Yeah, and do you think that's going to be the case? Do you think that a lot of law firms are just going to go back to normal again once they can? Or do you think this will have a lasting change on the industry?
I think it'll have a lasting change on the industry, because even those who went back to normal and went back to their old ways now are faced with firms who are technically so much more advanced. Because before it was a feeling like there were some outliers who were very geeky, were very out there, and they were, you know, a bit shocked, yeah, you're the weird ones. But now everyone had to, and so I'm like, yeah, it's kind of working, and my clients are actually happy enough, and a lot of our clients are actually not even in the office yet. And why would they travel halfway through Vienna to sit around when it's working just fine by video? So, and those will have then the advantage. So even the ones who are going back will be forced to get a move on again and reconsider more than they've been before.
Yeah. I mean, certainly, as you said earlier, if the clients are in demand now of more technological services and solutions, and they're seeing a better service from their lawyers and perhaps their cost savings somewhere, it all tends to be client driven, I think. And we certainly see that over here as well. The clients are demanding better service, and you have to respond to that. And those that don't will not fare very well. And it's not limited over here, I don't think, to just technology. It's with legal process management and project management, process improvement over here are huge. It doesn't have quite the same sex appeal as legal tech necessarily, but they're all inherently linked. Are those big terms over there? Is that stuff that you look at over in Austria and surrounding?
We do. I don't know if everyone does. I think we've met the Future Law Conference, and Sophie Martinez, who organizes it, she's very, very big on processes as well, because we all understand that is the foundation of digitalization. It's the foundation of technological change. But for business as process-driven, as attorneys, we know surprisingly little about processes. So you know, okay, there's a court date, there's a deadline, you've got a certain statute of limitations or whatnot. And that we do know, but very few times, like, have you got a process where you know what actually happens with the letter when a letter comes in? What does the secretary do with it? Is that actually useful? These are the things that are really lacking to define these things, because it's worked, and it's worked for such a long time. And you've talked about the demands of the clients. And Sophia was also the one who said that lawyers only listen to two kinds of people, other lawyers or their clients. So either they see a colleague, a competition, or a friend who's got something really nifty that they don't, or on the other hand, a client who wants something. So the cost thing is absolutely an issue, because even big companies are not willing to pay the big hourly rates anymore.
Yeah.
But that's where the understanding sometimes clashes. For example, we did a legal tech course for attorneys, and talking about, you know, process improvement, etc., and how much time you could save if you can streamline or use a legal tech product for all those really, you know, stupid monkey tasks.
Yeah.
And then a colleague sat in the audience like, why would you do that? I get paid by the hour to do this. I can pay my associates by the hour. I can bill, say, I don't know, 200, 300, 400 euros an hour for my associates to do that. Why would I streamline it?
Mm. Yeah.
And then you don't even know what to say or where to start, really.
Yeah. If you have to ask, you're in the wrong place.
And there'll be clients like that for a while longer, and the market is still big enough here, as opposed to Germany, for example, where the competition is much, much more fierce. So there is still place for that, but I don't know how long.
No, I mean, are you seeing the same in Austria as we sort of see in the UK and in the US and everywhere else, in that everything now, you know, clients want things fixed price now, they want, you know, everything determined up front, they want the cost reduced? Are those same factors being imposed on the firms you're working with now as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, obviously it doesn't work for court trials, because in a court trial, you'll never know how long it's going to take. So it's a very hard thing to calculate. Plus there are tariffs for that if you have to. When it comes to things like the other IT related work I do, if it comes to, for example, data privacy, for me, it's much easier to say, okay, the privacy statement costs X. If I send you a guide what to do with your website, how to correctly implement a cookie banner, that costs X. Because for me, that's the same. If I bill that by the hour, the first client, I would bill a metric ton. And then the second one, whatever it takes to copy and paste it. So it's fair to neither, and I wouldn't really get any benefit from it as well. So I think it's much easier to say, okay, I'll invest some time, but no, I can reuse that. And that's basically the whole idea of legal tech, is to, you invest time once, but then you can keep the costs lower in total and still make money from it, and then can do other things. Or then I say, I write the privacy statement where 2/3 is basically the same, and then there are 3 new clauses that are interesting that I want to deal with, and which makes my job much more interesting as well. Or when it comes to an online shop, and say, I want your help with an online shop, setting up the terms and conditions, etc., etc. That's something that I can calculate. Obviously, there's always a risk up and down. But yes, they demand it. I mean, it's the same thing when I say I want a new website, and I don't really care if it takes them 2 hours or 5 hours, but I want to know if it costs 2,000 or 5,000 euros, for example. And we see that much, much more here. And there are many colleagues who go out with fixed packages that they're selling for very good prices. So that is absolutely demand, and you can't do that when either you're alone and you have to organize yourself and you don't want to reinvent the wheel every bleeding day, or you just don't want the quality to suffer, because if you have to rewrite everything, you have to rethink of everything again, apart from doing it once properly and then being able to replicate it.
Yeah, there's lots in there, isn't there? Knowledge management is a big thing, as well as the process improvement and so on.
I mean, I've seen that. I've been in big law firms, and then sometimes you see these emails going around. Yeah, has any one of you already dealt with such and such topic in such and such jurisdiction? And I think, like, how can there not be a way to look for this? Or when I said, yeah, have you got a template for this? Yeah, well, we've done this 50 times, just take one.
Yeah.
And God beware, I did not know what I was doing, took a template that was 3 years old, didn't think that was that long ago, was a change afterwards. Did I know that? No. Also didn't know it was a bad template of a colleague who didn't really do very good writs.
Yeah.
And that was really, really annoying. Because
Yeah.
when you're training people, and you're supposed to have been trained, you just need somewhere to say, yeah, that's a guideline, that's how it should look like. And then it's much, much easier to deal with the interesting stuff if you've got the formalities down.
Yeah. That's a question of investment for the firms, isn't it? To make sure they've got the right infrastructure in place, and technology is just one aspect of that infrastructure, I think.
Oh, that becomes deeply, deeply philosophical, I think. A lot of law firms want to do legal tech because it's the cool thing to do now, because everyone does it, and some take the money and throw it at a random legal tech company just so they can say we're doing legal tech, and use it more as a marketing tool rather than really thought through.
Yeah. Well, I suspect that's similar here, but take us through then what the legal tech space is like in Austria. I mean, who are the big players out there, and what does it look like, the scene?
Well, the core legal tech space in Austria is divided by the law firm software. So basically the software you use to run your firm, which goes from client management to, it has a database, it does all the billing for you, it does all the electronic communications with the court, which is fully implemented in Austria. So that's the first thing, and that's the first thing you need. And there are two big and one smaller player in Austria, because it's the decisions usually between the two big ones, your expert and advocate, and it's a philosophical question, almost like a Mac versus Windows situation. That's why Michael and I are also not going to have a common law firm, because that's the one thing we can't agree on. But so that's what you start with, and with that you have basically your bases covered, because you've got your case management, you've got all your clients together, you've got all your hours, your billables. So that's basically the core thing you need. And obviously there are interesting solutions abroad as well, but the issue are always with two things: the fully implemented court communication, so to have that interface, and the cost, so that the Austrian attorney tariffs are fully implemented if you go to court, because no one wants to do that maths all the time. So those are two very core things that you would need. And then the other part is the legal research. And then there are two big players. One is Manz, which is an Austrian legal publisher, and the other one is LexisNexis, which comes from the United States, and I think they bought an Austrian legal publisher. Okay. They're both following similar strategies, so they have got the legal basis with all the commentaries, the magazines, etc. Yeah. Different pricing structures, different models, but so those are really the core tools. But now, obviously, because legal tech has become such a thing, a lot of more companies have popped up all around Austria. Yeah. And the reason, I think, why in Austria it has become such a thing is that by our laws, well, the attorney codes, so to say, we're very restricted on where we can put our data. Yeah. So as of now, obviously there are always changes and there are talks, and hopefully later this year there'll be changes to the law even if it's fully GDPR compliant, we couldn't even have the server in Germany with our client data. So that's really the biggest issue, and that's why I think Austrian firms have had the possibilities to thrive, even though they're, I don't even know, I think there are only under 10,000 attorneys in Austria. Don't quote me, I'd have to look that up, but it's not a really big market.
Yeah.
So I think the issues are twofold. You'd need to either be able to provide those services for other fields as well, either in-house lawyers or notaries or accountants, in order to make it worthwhile, because attorneys are just not big enough of a market, or to have something consumer facing.
Yeah.
So if it's like the internal legal tech, as I like to call it, there are tools like Yurio that we use, that we had in our podcast as well, which is basically a data rooms and the chat, and there's a Kanban board. So this is a way where we can easily have data rooms with our clients, send stuff to and fro, and the servers are in Austria, so we don't have to bother about these things. Then there are more and more contract generating software that comes up, which is, let's say, hit and miss. I've been testing these things heavily at the moment, because I need one for myself, and basically either I need one for myself or I'll have to make one if I can't find something. And I've always found they're more geared towards the legal department, where the legal department sets up something and then, say, a sales colleague can just make a quick NDA by clicking a couple of things. So really user-friendly way, but not very flexible often. Yeah. So that's there. And then there's obviously Future Law as a company with their incubator. They've got the Legal Tech Hub, where some of the biggest Austrian law firms got together and said, yeah, we'll chuck the money in, make an incubator out of it. And Michael is part of the Legal Tech Hub as well. So that's been good. So that's brought in a lot of international legal tech startups as well. And then there are a couple of conferences. I think there are 2 or 3 legal techie conferences, some from more of a scientific perspective, some more a product perspective, that are around. And what you can really see is there are more online platforms coming up. So lawyer search platforms, or just knowledge bases, or, you know, law job finders, and little things like that seem to be popping up everywhere. Yeah. And like I said, there are a lot of law firms who do their own thing, who say, yeah, now on our website you can buy a contract quickly, and they integrate an online shop. So the market has spread immensely, and I think it's getting really, really hard to focus on, okay, what do I need and what do I get? So it's more of a, yeah, do I know someone who's got something that I need where I can try it? Or like I said, like I test with the contract tools. But I think that sometimes the overview is missing.
Yeah.
It's a little bit random sometimes.
It seems similar here, in the sense that there are lots of different solutions for lots of different problems. And what we seem to see is the startup scene here it's still new, relatively speaking, but I probably, by comparison to several other jurisdictions, we're probably a few years ahead. But what I think we see is quite a few startup companies who find a problem, and then they build their solution for it, and then they scale it up as best they can, with maybe some injection of capital from a Silicon Valley type investor, and then they just grow it as quickly as they can, and then it gets offloaded to one of the big companies who maybe acquires it and tries to integrate. So it doesn't strike me as a great way of developing technological solutions for lawyers, because they have the raising capital in mind, and maybe how quickly can we grow this in mind. And it's much quicker to grow something which is the solution to one problem than it is to 5 or 10 problems, or however many there are in a law practice. But what I really like about what you said is the fact that the Austrian firms have gotten together and done incubators, because I don't think we've seen that here. And I think that's what Pete and I would like to see more of, is the collaboration and the community feel, which we just don't have here in the same way.
Well, I think our firms are just in themselves, even the biggest Austrian firms are just tiny compared to big London law firms, for example. Yeah. So there was kind of a necessity. And I mean, the international law firms that are based in Austria as well, obviously they did their own thing, but I think that was important, and to also attract more, like I said, international talent. But what I found a bit, what people are missing, that they're so focused on the legal tech side of the issue that they don't think about, there might be perfectly fine tools already out there that were just not specifically made for attorneys, that might need a tweak or two in order to comply with all the restrictions attorneys have in their job. Again, it sometimes feels like reinventing the wheel. Yeah. Because when I sometimes think, oh yeah, I wish I could do that. Like we did on the hackathon, and it's like, yeah, you know, I wish I could, you know, the proofing when people send me screenshots are usually nonsense. They don't contain all the information I need, etc. And like, how can there not be such a thing? Well, because no one sat down and did it. And because in the tech industry where you need such things, where say to make a proof of, okay, that's the code at a certain date of a certain software version, and send that to Git, that's perfectly normal for a software developer. But for an attorney, that'd be weird. And I think that's a bit this forced, it has to be legal tech thinking behind it, where tools that could be so much more almost limit themselves to just the legal or legal related market, which I think is really a shame.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking to another organization recently about sort of process improvement and aspects like that, and they're using a lot of the same methodologies that have been used in software development and manufacturing and things, and applying them to the legal industry. And you think in the same way that actually if they're using the same methodologies, then they can probably use the same or similar tools, or those software tools that already exist with a bit of tweaking could be adapted to the legal industry. But of course, as you point out, if you're a law firm looking for some tech, you only look at legal tech, and you know, you don't look beyond that at the moment. And I guess the startups are the same. They look at the products available in the legal tech industry only, rather than going beyond that.
And that's why sometimes having just, you know, you have a lawyer who goes like we do, who goes to a techie friend and says, I've got this problem, can you solve this? Yeah. And if there's not, you know, if there might be some different solution in the film industry, in dentistry, in God knows what, where it might come from. But amongst those two people, you might not know that particular industry. And then there might be a tool that really just needs a rebranding and a bit of a tweak, as you said. And I think that's almost a shame. You've got software companies who maybe don't consider lawyers that much of a market because it's a small market, and say, yeah, they've got their own problem. If they want something special, then yeah, whatever. You're not going to change our code for those couple thousand people. Or I don't want to talk to lawyers in general, or the other way around. And a lot of lawyers then gravitate to legal tech because very often there is that combination of a lawyer and a tech guy, and there's like, okay, there's a lawyer there who understands my language, as if we're from different planets again. I think that's almost a shame, but I appreciate it for what it does. I appreciate legal tech extremely for making people move on technically. Like I've been in big firms where said, yeah, Katharina, you have to do legal tech. It's like, whatever. This is my normal state of being. Whatever you want to call it, whatever makes you give me money so I can get new tools for the firm. I don't care how you call it. I don't care if you call it disruption or legal tech or digitalization, or I really don't care. It's the goal. It's what it's about. It's where you want to go at the end of the day.
Yeah. And where do you mentioned some of the limitations that there are, some of the restrictions on the technology that you can use around where things are hosted and aspects like that. In the UK and the US, everyone, all the new legal tech solutions, everyone goes for hosted environments, and everything in the cloud is the key, because we don't seem to have those same kind of limitations. Do you see that restriction easing in Austria and other areas in Europe? And do you see more opportunities for sort of UK, US, any other companies offering their solutions into Austria?
I mean, the first threshold is always the GDPR compliance.
Yeah.
So even if it's a software where you don't store client data, you still have to be GDPR compliant. So that's the first step. That's why a lot of the time US is just often not an option, plain and simply. And there are big companies. I mean, Amazon Web Services, you can select a server in Frankfurt or Paris if you want to. So you don't have to have your data in the US, and the big companies understand that. So to be able to host the data within the EU, within the GDPR world, makes it already much easier. As far as the attorney problem is concerned, where we really, at the moment, haven't got much opportunity to store our client data abroad, even within the EU, we're hoping that's changing. Like I said, there are talks within the Bar Association that there will be changes coming up. We don't really know what they look like. We're hoping for them to be published this autumn. Yeah, but with COVID, everything. On one hand, obviously,
changed.
I hope it sped it up. I hope it made it more necessary, because just the whole fact of finding a video tool that's hosted in Austria is almost impossible. So often you said to your client, I'll use whatever you're using. So
put the responsibility on them. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know it doesn't work like that, but you get the idea, and it's really hard. So yes, it's changing, but you've got two versions. Either have a tool where the client data can be stored locally or in an Austrian cloud or on the law firm's own server. I mean, a lot of law firms from a certain size, even small ones, have their own servers, have everything run there, even a little mail server. Because of that. So I think that's one option, to give the opportunity to have an on-premise solution, or at least within the EU, which will make it much easier. Everything else we'll basically have to wait and see. I mean, back to the things I'm testing at the moment, because that's obviously an issue for me. I've tested a contract generator, a Swiss software, which is cloud-based and everything, and it would do everything down to have the client data in there that fills it out automatically. But I know until the law changes, I wouldn't be able to use that. I can use my plain contracts, just with party A, party B, and then fill it out locally. That'd be an option. If software is good enough, it might be a legitimate option. But I might not be able to use it to its full extent because of the restrictions we have. We're really desperately waiting for that. So I think that's the balance you'll have to find if you want to come into Austria. And I know Germany is not much different. I know Switzerland is not much different. But
As you say, it's interesting to hear you talk about on-premise and things, because that is, especially in the UK and things like that, people are moving more and more away from on-premise because they're outsourcing their IT infrastructure. They're getting rid of all of this internal expertise to do these kind of things. Whereas you're saying, actually, potentially in Austria and other EU countries, that is still maintained. People still have that ability in-house to do these things.
Yes, because we have to. I mean, the ability is not always in-house. So we'll have IT guys come around. They are not always employed, but we sometimes just have to. And at the end of the day, often it's more easy to just have a server running before you deal with all these kind of things. And if there's a way, and if you can set up your own private cloud on your server, and for example, in my boss Michael, actually law firm is 250 kilometers away, and I'm not commuting, but I've got a terminal server set up. I'm logging in there and working remotely, and it's always supposed to be like that. And that is perfectly normal also in a lot of small law firms in Austria. So they're set up to do these things locally, and the bigger a firm gets, the more they have on premise. But there is a sweet spot where it's not affordable. And
yes,
my law firm software of choice, they don't yet offer a fully cloud-based service. If the cloud was in Austria, I would take my money. And it's a Windows solution. So my biggest issue is I had to buy a Windows computer again after 15 years of not owning a Windows computer. So that was really hard. And if there was a way where I didn't have to do that, I'd be all game. So if there was just a purely online version, I'd be happy, because what do I know with it? And the whole implementation of it is an issue too. But again, from the already little market of attorneys, the littler market of attorneys who work with Linux or Mac, doesn't make it worthwhile. But so yes, the need is there, and they know that. But at the same time, the effort of providing the software online is sometimes too big. So I think the biggest chance, or what I also said to a friend in the business, where I would move is if there was an online version, if it was legal, or if at least the servers would be in Austria somewhere. I mean, there are big IT companies in Austria that would host that. So where I wouldn't have to host it on premise, and it's all online. If I can communicate with the court and it does my calculations, I would swap. So, and that's it. The question is the market big enough for someone to come in? And that's what we're really struggling with.
What about other barriers, like the language barriers that might exist? You obviously don't have that issue because you speak perfectly.
Well, I don't see the language barrier that much, because I think more than being digital natives, we've all grown up learning English from very young age on, and English and legal English is part of university these days. So apart from a much older generation, it's perfectly normal. And there are plenty of clients where you have to, we've got international deals, or you've got clients from abroad who live in Austria, business people, where you have to talk to English to them. So English as a lawyer is an absolute necessity. So if you don't speak English to at least conversational level that you can hold a basic legal conversation and get your point across in English, I think that'd be just as bad as not being able to type something in Word. They exist, and you need people to help you with that. But I think you can expect from most, I don't know, 95% of attorneys in Austria to speak English well enough, especially to deal with the software. That's not that much of an issue.
Well, that's a lesson to us all in the UK that that is not a barrier for us, and it's also a lesson that feel ashamed that we're limited, most of us, to just one language.
We can continue not worrying about learning other languages because it's not a problem.
That was not what I was trying to
Was
say.
that not the message?
What I was trying to say is we're really making a lot of fun of you.
Yeah,
Yeah, we understand.
But I think, you know, there's a lot of software, especially in the open source space, and I know you that just come out in English. I mean, I don't have Photoshop, I use GIMP.
Yeah.
I don't even know if there's an English. I think there's one of the softwares I've got that came out in German, and I had to switch it back to English because I didn't know what I was clicking on, because the English things made more sense than the German translations.
Okay.
So I think to find the right kind of translator for that might also not be too easy.
Yeah.
I think that is one of the smaller thresholds.
Yes, it's not a big issue for things.
No.
yeah,
Not really. So I think the language you can deal with if there are enough clients that say, oh, I want it in German, and then you ask a translator to do that. So, you know, that's, I think, easier implemented than, you know, if you're over the threshold and say, yeah, I want to go in that market, I want to go to Europe, and most of us still speak English. It might be the easiest way to do it, actually.
yeah, good. Well, we were in Switzerland not that long ago as well, weren't we, Pete? And of course, we figured
they barely speak German.
They speak German and French and everything, you know. Same with Luxembourg. So the one universal language then will be English.
Yeah.
I just speak French to Swiss people because I don't understand their German.
Fair enough. No, well, we did a little bit of German, didn't we? We didn't understand the German either. And that's not because our German wasn't good enough. It's just it was slightly different, or we felt it was slightly different anyway.
Slightly different, a completely different language.
Completely different.
Good. I feel better about myself now.
I've understood people on rural Orkney better than Swiss people.
Okay. Oh, that's
or
good.
somewhere
That's saying
deepest Glasgow.
You've obviously got. I've seen some of the articles on your website, and some of them about open source too, which I confess I can't necessarily read all of them without having them translated. You've also got your own podcast. Just tell us a little bit about that. Are you looking for more people to come on to your podcast?
Yes, always. Obviously, our podcast at the moment, until we do our episode, is in German, just because our guests are Austrian or German speaking.
Yeah.
And the articles are too, but obviously the more interest will be more international, the more bilingual we'll get. Yeah. And it's not that complicated to set up a second language for the website. Yeah. So we'll do that. And the podcast will move into more English episodes because we want to go more international as well. I've actually been one of the early podcasters. Sets on the show, I've been podcasting for, I think, 13 years or something like that.
Oh, okay.
My first podcast was a Heroes podcast, the science fiction TV show, when it was still good. So 2 seasons where it was good, and then 1 season of ranting.
The first couple of seasons, yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. I've been on and off podcasting ever since, but mainly entertainment stuff. And I've always wanted to do a law podcast. When we did Nerds of Law, I was like, well, that was, that's an obvious one. And I kept bugging Michael, and he was like, yeah, I don't know about podcasts. Like, you have to podcast with me. And now he's all into that, and like, yeah, who can we drag on? And we basically start where I think at the time we record this, around our 12th episode or something like that. And we've started off with people we know from the industry where we think, oh, they've got interesting things to say. So both legal tech companies, and by saying both, I mean more than 2 things, legal tech companies, other lawyers, just geeky people who are neither in legal nor tech, who've got interesting things to tell us. So it's, from uni's perspective, so to get a lot of things in where we think, oh, you can learn from that, to really get the broaden the horizons and things that we want to learn. For example, we got a friend of Michael's in who is a pro in SEO. We don't know much about it. Like, I want to learn more about that. We'll drag them onto the show because as lawyers, as geeks, we need to learn about SEO.
Yeah.
We've got a hacker on. You know, these things.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. We've got cool things to say. We'll drag you on the podcast.
Yeah.
So yes, we're always happy for people to come on and talk to us. We've got fun things to say, and I think we're mostly driven, or I'm mostly driven by an insatiable curiosity.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's why we do this. For us, it's a think tank where we can express our weirdest ideas, and if we can make money with it, that'd be great.
Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah,
that'd be nice. Yeah.
That'd be a plus.
Yeah.
Well, we'll send you a euro after we're finished, and that'll get you started.
Yeah.
Yay.
Well, no, we find it's much better to have other people on the podcast. It sparks a better discussion, and you know, Pete and I have spoken to each other quite a lot over the years. It's great for us to have other people's views on, and yours have been fantastic. You're the first international guest, I think, on the.
Well, that's cool.
You know, big thumbs up for that. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Terrific.
What an honor.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things for us to, you know, to try and keep these relationships as well with things like Brexit and stuff. We're clinging on to Europe as long as we can at Panache Software. So
Pete and I have got our fingers firmly grasped into Europe, haven't we? As best
we're trying.
Yeah, but that's another one of these things which I appreciate. It's going to be, well, much harder for you.
Difficult, yeah.
Not just becoming a third country in GDPR terms,
no.
Yes.
which for any privacy lawyer is a thing. But yeah, I know for myself, I don't know. We hope to be able to go back to the UK this year, but next year we've got no idea when it will be possible again.
Yeah.
I mean, we're traveling with dogs, so we don't want them in quarantine for months just for a trip to the UK. So very much up in the air, everything. And it's really nice to hear that you are still linked to Europe, even though you keep saying Europe. For me, that was the same thing.
Oh yeah, we are in Europe. Well, we think of ourselves in Europe, but well,
Pete, you and I were born EU citizens, so you know what can we were EU citizens. What can we really say? Yeah.
I actually wasn't, because Austria didn't join until '95.
Okay. Oh, there we go.
Oh, well, you've got the good.
We decided.
Oh.
Well, that's great. Well, I'm sure we could do another hour if we wanted to on EU.
Absolutely.
Well, we'll come back for something else later on, and keep our relationship via remote while we can.
Absolutely.
That's great. Thanks very much.